This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not meant to replace any medical diagnosis or advice. These are just my personal experiences, and you don't have to believe a thing I say. My only wish is that you be entertained and at the same time be inspired to create a better future for yourself and your community. I would like to first start with my old life. A boy called Shami. I was born autistic to a very loving family. However, my family were just the product of many of what we see in failed society, such as unconsciousness or chaos. When I was 2 months old, I fell head first from my father's shoulder onto the hard floor. I had my first surgery when I was 3 months old. Throughout my life, I was always oversensitive, especially to sounds. For example, with the vacuum cleaner or a Hoover in the house, I would just roll over, toss and turn, and hold my head and get into some sort of like hysterical frenzy because I just could not handle noise. Even basic things of, day-to-day life. Flushing a toilet would cause me so much trauma. I could not flush a toilet without pretty much wanting to cry until I was about 13 years old. My parents were always loving and protective. However, I was always exposed to crazy levels of human behavior, mainly with extended family. For example, aggression, shouting, forcing, abusing. It seemed that in extended family environments, whoever was the most obnoxious and loud would get all the attention and therefore the respect. Being a young boy with autism, I couldn't say hello when I was younger. Therefore, uncles used to hit me because they thought I was being rude. This boy cannot say hello, and just whack me for no reason. This was an ongoing experience. Until eventually, I think it was when I was about 6 years old, I would really be at home in front of a mirror, really try to squeeze out a hello, just so I wouldn't get beaten the crap out of, anything to just get out of that pain and that sort of ridiculous exposure to these ridiculous people. So one day I, went to the next family function. I was so happy that I could say hello now. So I was just ready for whichever uncle came to just say hello. And I would be so happy because I could finally say hello. I would finally get out of a whack. And then one of my uncles would be like, hello, wow, how are you? And I wasn't prepared for that. So then I got another whack. You say fine, thank you. And then next time I'd go home, I'd practice and practice, just for the life of me, Shami, please just speak, properly and coherently and clearly. So I would go to the next function, uncle would come, they'll be like, hello, I'll be like, hello, and then they'll be like, how are you? I'll say, fine, thank you, and then think, wow, I've gotten so far, I'm finally free of this pain. And then I'll get a hit and say, you didn't ask me how I am. There's just never an end to this sort of crap show when I was younger. Being autistic and having intellectual disabilities meant that I would do anything just to get some sort of love or recognition. So when I would be in family environments, and I would just, because I had no sort of control over. It seemed the only control I had in my life was when I was eating. It was like the only thing I could do really well was when I was eating. So my aunties would be in the kitchen and be like, wow, look at Shami. He really knows how to eat. Well done, good boy. And I obviously took that as, wow, I could eat very successfully. So then obviously I would non-stop eat all the time. It was the only power I felt, just being able to eat properly. And I felt like a failure. I felt hated in sort of every sort of environment. However, I seemed to be a good boy when I was eating. And this led to obesity from a very young age, I'd say age 6 onwards. Then suicidal depression was my norm from about age 7 onwards. Experiencing crazy levels of abuse, injustice, and at the same time disability and sensitivity. My mantra was, I wish I was dead, I wish I was dead. Or, no one gives a F about me. And yeah, I used to use that that was my inner voice when I was younger, with that sort of language, because I was just exposed to it all the time. It was just the language I was used to being around. So no one gives a F about me, and I wish I was dead was just playing in my head all the time. My school life was very confusing, even from the first day. The concept of school would have been explained to me, however my young autism brain never comprehended or processed such information. So in my world, I was just thrown into a place where everyone is my height, my age, and we're all wearing the same thing. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And my entire school life, I would just be at the back of the class, just rocking. Eventually, I got very good at hiding and pretending. For example, I noticed if a teacher asked me something and I pretended like I was thinking about the answer, like that, someone else would shout out an answer and then it would spare my embarrassment. And I noticed when I was in my sort of autism or depression mode, if I just looked like I was paying attention, that would be enough to keep the teachers away from me. They were more concerned with everyone else in the class because they were the loud, disruptive ones, and I was just silent. And I knew I was different from very young. For example, everyone else, when they look at something, they can actually process it. With someone with autism, they can't see or hear at the same time. Therefore, I would either have to be listening to you or looking at you. I could not do both at the same time. School was hell for me. There was always an incident with me at school, at least every week. In grade 3, I remember just being kicked so hard on the face, in the nose, or even just, the biggest, I would be small and the biggest kid in school would just run and whack me and knock me over as if I wasn't even there, and I would hit my head first on the concrete. I would always be bullied because I couldn't speak properly. I remember comments such as, Shami's mouth is so fat that he can't speak properly. I would never sleep. I would just lay awake all night, just dreading waking up to do it all over again. And because I had no cognitive ability, so if, let's say, an after-school club was cancelled, I wouldn't know, so then I'll just be standing at the gates of school just waiting for hours for my mom to pick me up, because I could not communicate to my mom that, oh, something's been cancelled, my after school, whatever it was, athletics or football was cancelled. This happened many times where, some school either ended early and I just would not be able to communicate, so I'll just be standing, waiting there until 4 o'clock, waiting for someone to pick me up. Eventually, my level of apathy and my autism just led me to not being able to express hardly anything at all. So kids in my school used to punch me as hard as they could. And because I couldn't express pain or go ow or anything, they just thought it didn't hurt me. So then they would call bigger kids from year 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and be like, you should hit this guy, he doesn't feel it. I promise you, hit him, nothing happens. And then everyone would just line up to take their best swing at me. I was desperate for any sort of power or protection, especially because I used to watch all of these sort of cartoons, and the superhero would somehow always train and become stronger and eventually overpower an all-powerful enemy. And I thought my dad was a perfect role model. He was strong and no one messed with him, and he went to the gym. So I started doing weights from age 13. There was always dumbbell sets or something at home. So I would just lift loads of weights when I was younger. from age 13 onwards, just to look tough or to look big and to look scarier. I thought if I at least looked big and scary, people would leave me alone. So I would look angry, I would look tough, I would look aggressive. And I would always make sure that I was around people. For some reason, it just made me safer, thinking that if at least there were witnesses around, it would make things better. Even though no one ever did anything, it just made me feel a bit safer, feeling that it would be witnessed rather than having to face it alone. Football was my only outlet. I remember every day after school I would just be kicking a ball at a wall non-stop all the way until dinner time. It was the only thing I used to do. And then I remember one day I was at a football tournament. A fight erupted between this one player and the entire opposing team, and along with all of the organizers. And then this guy who was about 15, 16 years old was about to get ambushed by the other team and the organizers. And then before they did so, he just said, "If you touch me, I will get DBG to end you." And then the entire other team and the organizers were like, "Oh no, let's leave him alone." And then I was just thinking, what the hell is going on? And then I overheard someone ask someone else, "Who is DBG?" And then the person replied, "Die by the gun. They're a dangerous gang. No one ever messes with them." And as I watched this scene and watching the other team lay off and the organizers lay off this person while he was just standing there in his power, I was just stunned and impressed. And I was thinking, maybe if I did that, people would leave me alone. I would love to be able to have that sort of power, you know? This sort of thing was inspiring to me at the time. So back in those days, I think there was no Facebook or anything. There was sort of pixel websites where people could put themselves, like make their own sort of social website. And that's how kids sort of got in touch with each other in those days. So I made it my mission to be friends with like sort of all of the gangs around the country. Sort of anything to get any sort of protection. I just wanted to be left the hell alone, man. And although I couldn't speak in like full sentences, I was really good at sort of just dropping a subtle bit of humor here and there, just sort of like 2-3 word answers, which I would pick up from my dad, just watching him at social gatherings. So I always doubled down on my strength, which was the ability to make people laugh and loving people. I even saw the power of making people laugh in family functions. For example, if an uncle came to hit me, I would just make him laugh and then he would smile and walk away. So there I was messaging people on pixel websites and trying to make friends with anyone who had any sort of power which could protect me. However, by age 15, I had even more built up extreme emotional pain, which seemingly could only be numbed by eating loads of food or drinking alcohol or smoking, which is something I would pick up going into these sorts of gang environments. I spent most of my life in clinics or doctor's offices or psychologists' offices, visiting psychiatrists. And then one day when I was 18 or 19 years old, we were on our way home from a doctor's appointment, and I asked my mum what happened in the meeting because, as usual, I wouldn't have been able to process anything the doctor was saying. And then my mum just said, "Oh, nothing, son, we were just talking about your autism." And I was just thinking, what the hell is autism? Because to me at the time, just the way that she said it, I thought, I got extremely concerned. Like, autism just sounded horrendous. It just sounded like something you would use to describe someone who's completely immobilized. So I went home and I was like, what the hell is autism? So I went Googling autism, and then I was stunned because it seemed like my whole life I felt alone. However, when I was looking at all of these videos on YouTube of people with autism, I was like, excitement struck me because I was like, wow, there's a whole race of people out there exactly like me. I never felt like I fitted in, and then it was just really relieving to know that there's others like me out there. So I became obsessed. I went through all of the autism material online. I was always researching what the hell can be done to make things easier for me or my race of people. However, what I was experiencing on the internet was the same sort of thing I was experiencing in reality, which was just being sent from pillar to post by the next nurse, the next doctor, the next psychologist, give him another evaluation, up his medication, all of that stuff. And then when that doesn't work, up the dosage, and I was just on that cycle. So I got to like really high doses of medication. As in, you would give an elephant like 2 milligrams of this stuff, but I was on like 80 milligrams, you know, I was hardcore. And then when I was age 19, we met, in my opinion, is the best psychologist I ever met at the time. She just gave us a diagnosis of, you know, now my label was pervasive development disorder, ADHD and depression. This psychologist told my mom, or told my parents, we cannot help you anymore. However, take your son to this brain center. They develop cognitive ability. So go to the brain center, let your son develop his cognitive ability, because right now he's scoring -7 years his age, -9 years his age. His best ability is -2 years his age. So go to the brain center, let him develop his cognitive skills, as she said it, and at the same time, let him go and let him learn to be independent. And obviously my mom didn't take that very well. She was like, how dare you tell me to let my son go, look at him, you know, all of that stuff. I went to the brain center, got met by a neuroscientist. I didn't like warm up to her because it just felt like I was doing what I've been doing my entire life of just being evaluated. However, her and my mom talked me into doing a program at this brain center. I ended up going there 5 times a week, and then I noticed about, let's just say, from 4 weeks in onwards, I was starting to like process what people were actually saying to me. I was able to read, eventually like 6 months later. I couldn't read properly or not more than like 2 words. However, I was reading, and then eventually reading as a hobby. I couldn't speak in full sentences. I started to actually complete my sentences when I was talking. And back then, if anyone said something to me, I would have forgotten it, like within a minute. However, after this brain training, you could give me 20 things and I could name them forwards, backwards, and remember all of them. For example, a shopping list. And then I actually started to get A's in formal education for the first time in my life. So when this brain center changed my life, I couldn't just go back to things as normal. I wanted to learn what happened to me. Like, how can you change my life so much in just a 6-month period? So I became obsessed with studying neuroscience. With my new learning ability and reading ability, I would use it all to study about the brain, to study all about psychology, to changing, you know, in that system over there, they call it changing your major. So I changed my major to psychology just to, you know, because I got obsessed with this because I was like, you know, I was suicidally depressed and now I'm somewhat enjoying life. However, none of the answers were coming to me in my psychology lectures or in my research at night. So then one day I asked the center which changed my life for an internship because I wanted to know how you do this. Like back then, I never told anyone this, but back then it would have been my dream to have been, let's just say, the principal of an autism center or something, or just to be a teacher of a school for learning disabilities. However, I went to this internship and I was shadowing one of the facilitators there, who's a neuroscientist. And I couldn't have written this any better, but the first student I was made to look after eventually ended up being a boy with autism. And I knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. Like, working at that brain center actually cured a lot of my suicidal depression, because I was just waking up in the morning excited to go and train students. It's what gave me my life back. So I went home one day and I asked my father, if I launch my own brain center, exactly like the one which changed my life, would you support me? And he, being a business professor, was like, so son, what's your motivation? And I was like, well, Dad, I've been ostracized my whole life. I've been beaten up for my condition. I couldn't participate at home or at school or in the community. I know how much I suffered growing up, and I don't want to see anyone else suffer like I did. And he was just like, okay, that's not really a business plan, but he was sold. So he helped me launch Brain Abilities, the A to Z of abilities, in 2015, using the exact same cognitive enhancement training which changed my life. I received a standing ovation at the launch of Brain Abilities. Some in the crowd were my former counselors and former doctors and former psychologists. So there I was now, training students at our center, and we started to have really good stories to tell. For example, children going from non-verbal to verbal, someone being unable to read to then reading. And because we are a brain-enhancing concept, we're not restricted to train individuals with disabilities. So I was training professionals, I was training bankers, I was training lawyers. You can see the results and testimonials on the Brain Abilities website. It did not matter to me at the time that, I was minus many years my age in terms of my cognitive ability, and now I was pretty much nearly on par with people my age. That didn't matter to me. What mattered to me now is that I am now the manager of a brain center, and I need to sort of further personally develop myself to be able to handle that. My past achievements meant nothing at this point. I had a whole new ballgame to play. So I kept on saying to myself, I need to improve more. I was also up at night just constantly thinking to myself that there's no one out there like me on a similar sort of mission, or there was no one else out there like me on the same wavelength. In my profession, I had now become close to professors and doctors and psychologists, and we became buddies. However, they were more concerned with sort of, oh, let's just have a beer after work and we'll just go back to work, and you know what I mean? This then led me to finding meetup.com, and I was super happy to find that there were others in the city that wanted to personally improve. There were many neuro-linguistic programming or NLP seminars, many sorts of groups like that. And if anything made a claim, I wanted to go in there and learn it, adopt it, and use it. Or if anything made a claim, I made it my obsession to see it through and see if it worked. Whether it was the NLPs, whether it was the hypnosises, whether it was alternative healing. At the same time, my motivation for researching this stuff was so that I could help in my race of people. Whether it was learning something which could help them, even if it wasn't a modality. For example, could they learn certain skills which would help them make a living when they're older? Whether it was certain businesses, whether it was trading, for example. I remember going to a trading place and I was just thinking, I wonder if my student could do this, That would make him independent when he is 25 years old, if he could just learn this stuff. So So I was always I was researching for myself at the same time researching on the blog to not save, but just give those who were in a similar boat to me in the past some sort of outlet. And then going around these sorts of personal development environments, I then found a center offering holistic therapies just about a 10-minute drive away. Also, I wanted to see what else was out there, because we get the best results in the world in terms of enhancing people's cognitive ability. However, I wonder what else could be done for myself. For example, whether it was I didn't care much about my obesity at the time because I just felt okay. But I had other biological constraints, like with my back, and anything that made a claim, I wanted to go and investigate that alternative therapy. I would spend all my money on going to these things, getting a new certificate, getting a new qualification. I then ended up getting almost 20 modalities under my belt because I became obsessed with this stuff. It was the answer to literally everything that could have helped me when I was younger. Also, because I spent my first 20 years in the system, nothing really moved the needle for me. The only thing that moved the needle for me were things way outside mainstream parameters. Again, this is just me. I'm not speaking for everyone. It was just my story at the time. I then got obsessed with one particular yogi who came from the Himalayas. And I was always a fan of, the power of the mind, because it's what we do. And then this guy gets on stage, he starts talking about moving mountains and suns with his mind. And then I'm thinking, we're just making people read. This guy's moving suns and stuff. He's moving mountains. We're just getting people better focus, better memory, better productivity. This guy's moving mountains and suns. So I went in there to learn from him. And I was very shocked. Just by learning particular aspects of Kriya Yoga, corrected a lot of my biological constraints with my back. From 2016, I would accept speaking opportunities at educational forums and knowledge conventions, despite only really being able to speak properly for 4 years at that time. I would eventually get comfortable on stage and around people, whereas in the past, people would normally cause me so much pain and suffering. Since at that time there was no one really around with a voice for autism, many would put their professional hats aside to ask me more about my story and my past. They would ask me questions as a family member or a parent or a friend, as opposed to a teacher, psychologist, or doctor. These presentations quickly went from the head space of academic jargon to the heart space of emotion, and I got emotional too. People seemed to be more interested in my story than all of the slides I had brought to showcase the latest findings in neuroscience, research, and data that our training has produced since the concept was first launched in America over 40 years ago now. I hated my past, but others were helping me to be a bit more grateful for my journey and efforts to get to where I was. I then woke up one day in January in 2017 to find my story on the front page of a national newspaper in Dubai. The headline read, "Dubai man turns disabilities into abilities with sheer will." And that is why I'm starting to bring my story more to sort of mainstream platforms rather than behind closed doors. Because through my history, whether it be myself or past students, I know what is possible when you train your mind and body properly. Turning disabilities into abilities is not your average ball game. It takes a heck of a lot of time and dedication and repetitions until you're eventually forging your neurology and biology towards a new destiny. When I was training impossible cases, I noticed that the only thing that would hold them back was their attitude and their beliefs. Those who had a weaker cognitive profile would eventually surpass those who didn't have a label simply because they wanted it more. I used to really look up to my first energy healing teacher who trained me in theta healing. I was the boss when it came to the brain, but when it came to healing, she was just far beyond anything I'd ever met before in terms of her abilities and results. And one day she mentioned that she was going to see her teacher. And I was thinking, this woman is so far beyond everything I have ever met before. I wonder who the heck her teacher is. Eventually I saw her post a picture and she tagged this person. I then started to stalk this guy on YouTube, and I felt extremely wowed by him, watching him in action. He was so energetic, powerful and ferocious, and at the same time so gentle and so loving, like a real life dragon. In his videos he would demonstrate his ability to heal people by moving his hands in Reiki fashion. These individuals would then fall into some kind of hypnosis, and when they woke up they would appear to be completely renewed. Whilst watching many videos of this man in action, I thought, I must learn this. This teacher said in his videos that his method of healing plays with the quantum field, or the quantum model of reality, or the field which forms matter. He mentioned that the brain and the body are like a biological computer, and by tapping into the quantum field, one is able to go in to the operating system and tweak the software, thereby creating a software update. This kind of made sense to me at the time, especially because of all of the research I was doing and also practicing alternative healing modalities and researching the likes of Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I knew what he was saying when he was talking about the quantum field, and also how it interlinks with biology and the mind. I then thought, I have to meet this person. So then I took my first ever flight, or my first ever trip by myself, to go and see him. He was hosting a workshop in Holland. And when I got there, I was even more intrigued, because in his videos, this man was so energetic and so loud. However, when I met him in real life, he was like a Zen monk, just very still and silent, and had this stern look in his face. He was extremely quiet and just spoke to everyone with a soft, gentle tone, but at the same time a very powerful tone. Kind of like a caring grandfather. And then when the workshop and training started the next day, I truly fell in love with this guy's method of working with people. We would take basic tips and pointers, have a discussion. However, all participants were pretty much on their own, working on their own personal development in a whole. Everyone was having their own inner journey in meditation. Through working on myself in this manner, I was developing so many esoteric abilities. Like for example, I became extremely precognitive, like more so than ever. This type of intelligence was different. It was like working like as a 5-dimensional being operating in 3-dimensional reality. It was like a completely different intelligence, super fast. When I mentioned this and like absolutely mind blown with the event, he mentioned it's because my gut is like my second brain, and because I was in their environment, I was not eating crap food, as they call it, and therefore I was becoming clearer, with more access to my intuition and other faculties, and that these faculties operate better when the system isn't too busy processing all of this rubbish food or processed food. He said something like, why do you think our intuition is called our gut instinct? If we do not respect our physical vessel and tip unhealthy foods, chemicals and toxins into it, those faculties will suffer and the communication will not be as effective. It is like tipping diesel into a petrol car. You need the right fuel, And then he said, look after your body. It is the home of your soul. I spent the first 2 days getting used to the new environment, frequency, and people. Everything in this world has a vibration, and frequency just means a specific vibration. For example, anger, it emits a frequency, joy emits a frequency. And having spent my whole life in mainstream society, it was strange now being in an environment with people so all-knowing and calm, whereas I was used to being around utter confusion, clumsiness, loudness, and stupidity. I was loving my new tribe. Many of them were extremely advanced in what they had achieved and overcome in life. I mean, I thought I was cool going in there with my autism background, now a successful entrepreneur, and these guys just had other stories which we'll go into later on this channel. Like the types of stories these people had would have been straight up unheard of in my hometown. Everyone was operating at a completely different belief than what I was used to. Long story short, I went to this man's training to be able to learn what he did to help people heal by manipulating energy in the quantum field. It was appealing to me as it meant I could really help people in a suffering loop so that many would not have to struggle so much. I wanted to know how he got all those incredible results, which were on his website, with all sorts of diseases, all sorts of conditions. However, at his workshop, he did nothing. He just provided the atmosphere of wellness, limitlessness, and super healthy food. He just spoke, laughed, and made everyone feel so loved. Yet people left there looking completely different to how they walked in. Like, I'll attach a picture of me in just a 10-day transformation going there. And bear in mind, this is by doing no physical exercise. Just meditating and eating the right food. Or eating food which was more compatible with me. This lady who came there that reminded me of my grandma was so much lighter and she had a spring in her step. Plus, by the end of this training, she was now talking about how she was excited for the future. Whereas on the first few days, all she was talking about was all of the sorrow, all of the misery, all of the wars she's been through, and all of the terrible things she had seen and experienced. Whereas now, she was just going, how does it get any better than this? And bending her knees, like squatting, which she couldn't do before she came. Now, this healer was multidisciplined. He dabbled into so many different disciplines and modalities and blended together what he thought was best. He could use any knowledge which served the situation at hand and bring it up, which is basically called wisdom. He would speak to attendees and vibe with them, whether they were a monk from Tibet, a yogi from India, a shaman from Peru, and even someone from Liverpool who just wanted to see what this was about. I could not get over this man, thinking about how I wish someone like this was in my hometown. Having someone like him around would really help people, and they would love him as well because he's so humorous. People could relate to him because he's funny. So his training was in the mountains in Holland, and when I left, since it was the first time traveling by myself, I thought I would spend 2 days in Amsterdam before flying back to London. My inner teenager would have found Amsterdam to be like heaven, with all of the drugs and like stuff I wanted to smoke when I was younger, now in abundance and legal. So as I got in the car on the way back to Amsterdam, my state was unreal. I was clear and at the same time had an overwhelming giggle inside me. It felt like every time I breathed I was getting into further and deeper levels of joy. Also, we had the same driver on the way home, and he was confused because he thought we might have been on drugs because of like how high we were. But he knew we wouldn't because we just looked so healthy and glowing with life and vitality. And he looked stunned as he was eavesdropping on our conversations, talking about stuff like leaving our bodies. And then I got to Amsterdam and I did not expect what happened next. As I walked around, I was not even tempted by all that I would have wanted in my teens. I was happy just walking in my new state, that the thought of inhaling smoke just felt terrible. So at the end of the night, I bought a space cake. So I wouldn't smoke, I would just eat it. Plus I thought it was a good idea to help me sleep, because I just thought there's no way I'm going to get to sleep with this much energy. So I ate the cake, and 20 minutes later, I just felt my stomach feel terrible. And although it altered me a bit, it just made me feel worse than I did before. And going forwards in life, I found this incredible, because one of the wishes I had in my teenage years came true. When I used to get drunk or high in my teenage years, I would always just think, I wish I could feel like this, but normal, but naturally. And it turns out it came true. I was now feeling better in my natural state than I did on any substance in the past. With my new natural state, I was beaming and super capable, super intelligent and super high. Naturally. Another goal off the bucket list ticked off. When returning home and eating regular people food again, my glow slowly faded, my bright and healthy glow slowly faded, and my appearance returned back to normal. Eventually I went back to work, and there was no difference about how I would go about training clients. However, the lessons I learned when I was doing my own personal development journey reiterated what I was doing from day one. I was simply playing quantum physics to my advantage, especially when training impossible cases. So I like to describe the quantum field as the playing field of all that is. It is everything. Every other science or philosophy is just different expressions of it. Quantum physics states that the smallest subatomic particles, which our world is made of, acts as potential or possibilities. Therefore, when I was training students, I was just creating an environment whereby a student would not even express their undesirable behavior. Like, for example, if you're fearful that a student will hit you, they most likely will. It is basic magnetism. So I create an environment where the pendulum would not even swing in an undesirable direction. Or if it did, it's fine because what was needed to come up were part of the process of what was needed to achieve the goal. To bring a story to success, or to break a cycle and create a new one. I think we've just about covered enough for my first YouTube video. Just about hardly began to touch on the topic of how Emperor Khalis was born. But long story short, Emperor Khalis basically means the emperor of that which is pure. If you liked this video, if you liked this story, hit the like and subscribe button, comment any feedback below. Also let me know how you would like to continue this conversation further. Let me know what you would like me to share. So I'm a trainer mixing multiple modalities. I'm not a guru, I'm not an expert in if you want to be a billionaire or anything like that, then I can't help you. However, my biggest expertise is turning disabilities into abilities, and also in the alternative world with regards to the healing arts or the transformational arts. And I just like to share what I'm best at with regards to neurology or physiology and energy. In my opinion, there's a lot of tip of the iceberg stuff out there, such as discussing esoteric concepts from an investigative standpoint, and there's a lot of theory out there. However, I like discussing real findings and real experiences in order to make this stuff more understandable to the general public. It is my wish to really bridge the gap between the alternative world and the mainstream world, because right now that side says that this side is rubbish, this side says this side is rubbish, Let's just all come together and act on what is best and implement it en masse. And that's what Emperor Khalis is about. Implementing what is best, throwing away the old model of selling your cause for the sake of selling your cause. So yeah, in the meantime, shine bright and don't let anyone dim your light.